Welcome to the Snow Millionaire Secrets Global Summit. Here's your host, Domenic Chiarella.
Hello and welcome to the Millionaire Mastery Secrets. I'm Domenic Chiarella, your host for this groundbreaking online event for the snow and landscaping industries. Now you're in for a real treat over the course of the next few days, and that's because I'm going to be hanging out live with 10 titans of our industry who are going to share with you, among other things, the one thing they wish someone had told them when they first started out in business so they could have taken their business with a lot less stress and struggles. So you're about to learn the most important strategies and tips for anyone who wants to build a successful business in this industry, and I'm so excited of sharing this information with you today. Now, why did we set up this summit? I'm looking to bring this great technologies of ours to our industry. It's out there. We have Google Hangout, we have that we're on now, Go to My Meetings, we have the cloud. But to merge these technologies, to be able to get it to our industry, to be able to do what we're doing even today in the comforts of your home, this is the why of this summit. And another thing too would be is face-to-face, hands down, is the best way to learn. It's the best way to grow. But think about it. What would happen if you could learn for 3 months for the price of one day that you bring somebody out to your place? So the why of this summit is going to be intricate of what we're talking about. Before I introduce you to our great guest for today, I want to let you know some housekeeping. We are broadcasting live via Google Hangout. It's kind of a new technology, so please bear with us if there are some problems or glitches. I have a great team behind me. They'll be able to fix it in a heartbeat. There is going to be a 60-second delay for what I'm saying and what you're hearing. So if you post questions to the site, they're going to be monitoring it, but I don't want you to understand that there might be some silence because we are behind. I'll check periodically throughout, and I'll pop over to the page to make sure that we answer some questions during it. Now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce you to today's guest, Michael Rorie. Hello, Michael.
Hello, Dominic. Good to be here with you.
Thank you for taking the time out to talk with us.
Pleased to be here.
Now, Mike, I'm going to read a little bio of yours just to get people to know what we're actually looking at and talking to. Michael Rorie has been participating in the green industry for over 30 years. He began a Cincinnati-based commercial maintenance company in 1969, one truck, and grew it to a multi-branch regional platform before selling it to a national provider in 2006. He now serves as CEO of Go iLawn, an online measuring program designed to help landscaping and snow removal contractors measuring more properties, bidding more jobs, and winning more sales. Exactly what we're talking about, Mike. So, Mike, what was the driving force you started on in your business many, many, many moons ago?
Thanks, Dominic. I was a young guy. I was 20 years old in '79 when I left a sales job to go work out of a truck. And my driving force was to be outside and to be working out of a four-wheel drive truck. I loved being outside. I loved equipment. I loved really the equipment more than, say, landscaping. But I knew I had the opportunity to be outside in a truck if I were a landscaper. So I started like 99% of our associates in the industry residentially in a good suburb in Cincinnati where I mowed grass, cut firewood, cleaned gutters, raked leaves in the fall, and plowed snow, driveways, sidewalks, and then eventually commercial lots in the winter. So that was the driving force. There was no business plan. I didn't go to school for landscaping. I just really wanted to be outside and wanted to be on my own. And I was a young guy, so my dad thought I would always make it to college at some point. But fortunately, the industry afforded me the opportunity to just keep going with no more of a plan than that.
It is funny when you said this, you like being outside. You like playing around with machinery. Like in those days, we used to be able to play with cars because you could work with them. Now they're so complicated, so it kind of made me laugh a little and saying, yeah, now you can tinker with these little small machines. but being outside is definitely where we started. And let's face it, like we had money back then. You know, back in the 70s, we were young kids, really, but we had money to do things and to live. It was an exciting time. Has it been
No
easy?
question. It was cheaper. Uh, gas was 50 cents a gallon. Uh, you could buy a new car for $3,500.
Oh my word!
It wasn't an international world without the internet. So things were just a lot slower and a lot calmer, no question. And statistically, I do think things were way cheaper. Our society has grown to have so many things because as our country's developed, businesses developed, and business people figure out ways to have people want to buy what they've got, whether it's a TV or an outdoor patio or a bigger home or a boat or a camper or a vacation. And so, yeah, it was a lot simpler time growing up than today. There's a lot more on everybody's, definitely.
It is amazing sometimes is before the phone. I know we had beepers, sometimes two-way. If we were lucky, we had two-way radios. And it was amazing how we survived without finding out. And you know yourself is when you started growing a little bit, and there's on the other side of town, it was a little unnerving. So, but was the road easy? Back then, was the road easy to where you became one truck and then became a multi-branch business?
The road wasn't easy. The fact, though, that it was simple, much simpler. I didn't feel like I was behind, but you couldn't move ahead very quick. I remember always talking to my dad in the 80s and saying to him, hey, I'm making 25 grand a year, or I'm making 30 grand a year, or I make 40 grand a year. And he would always tell me how good I was doing, but you're working 6 and 7 days a week. I think more than anything, other than it did take a long time to get scaled, it took 10 years to break $1 million, that the biggest thing was the experience. When you start a business from the ground up and you don't have a lot of experience in that, or a map or a model, you do a lot of things you would never do if you had a structured plan and an education, or if you went into a franchise, because you would just get on the road to where you're going. Versus part of the challenge for all small business people, and particularly for us, was, hey, you've got to keep defining what the map is, where you're trying to go. Because you get led in a lot of directions in this business, and in small business, I think, in general.
Well, Mike,
it was very tough.
There's no schools for this. You don't go to school. Even if you did, let's say, having some horticultural background, I agree with you. We learned from the hard school of Knox, and then we started hiring people that knew their stuff. But there is no schools. You can't say, I'm going to go to a business school. It's not business school that you could run a business. It's learning accounting, learning economics, learning, maybe some communication skills or HR skills. But running a business is much different. And that is where it lacks. So even though you say you had some things that you would like to have had, I think that some people would like to have what you had, and that's that gumption to become successful. And you said an interesting thing. You said it took 10 years to break your first million. I also was there too. It took 10 years, and we grew, and it was like, I can't get there. But I think people look at us and say, somehow we were lucky. We were different. And you're not saying that, are you?
No, there's really just a tremendous amount of perseverance to run any small business, a restaurant, a painting business, any type of contracting business. It takes a tremendous amount of perseverance. Often you see people even that work for themselves, and you go, boy, I'm not sure that person should be doing that. Right. I'm not sure they're cut out for it. But their desire to be on their own is greater. Their desire to be in charge is greater. And they're willing to tough it out and take the knocks
Uh-huh.
You know, so for young people especially, since we have kids older than a lot of these guys running businesses today, the the path I would tell people would be, if you're going to go to college, definitely get some business classes. Sure, get some industry classes for whatever industry you're picking. We'll say it's for landscape contracting today. There's always industry certifications. Yes, that is great general specific knowledge to what we're going to be doing. But do the internships. Go to work for people and see how their company functions and make notes as to what is so dysfunctional or disheartening, as well as what is so unique, what makes them successful and special, especially if you're going to enter a family business, you know, which there's a lot of those in the country in general, but in this industry as well.
Right.
So the opportunity to go see other people's places and work there, and don't be concerned about the wage, be concerned about the experience, is a great leg up. It's a great view to the future.
Sure. Well, you know, you mentioned that they're a family-run business. That's exactly what it is. It's a husband and wife, or a brother and a brother, or you know, or like you and I, we daughters in there. So that dynamic is something, and even in addition, but that you know, it is troubling. I find it also very troubling that there is nothing. I mean, I'm going to ask you this question: is how did you find these skills? Because again, there's nothing that you could say is, well, I'm going to go to this local community place, as if you had time, or I'm going to go to this university, or I'm going to do this intern. I don't. Where does people say? Where do people find these things? Where do people say, okay, I'm going to help you build your business, which is a lot different than having like a technical skill or accounting skills or communication skills. How did you do that? What did you do to make those? Because you grew in a tremendous amount of time. It was rockety. I mean, you didn't have just, of course, the beginning, but you got up. This was amazing. What did you do?
Well, first, I would say to people, and what I did do was I spoke to a lot of other business people. My dad was always our first backboard to bounce something off of, and he was probably our main guy for the first 3 to 5 years, and always throughout, but in the very beginning, he was our main guy. My dad was a manufacturer. He was in business for himself. So he had good business insight and just an insightful guy in general, and still is to this day. Then some of his friends who were in other businesses, and they had different personalities and different perspectives on things. So it was always good, again, to get more insight from other people you respected that were successful. One of my main industry guys early on was a fella that ran a small business. Heck, I don't know if he did $1 million, but he had worked for the city in the service department for years, but had enough gumption at about 45 years old to begin his own lawn care business commercially.
Wow.
And went into it. And this guy, Bill Mays, Lawn Systems, knew everything about equipment. He was a man from Kentucky, grew up on a farm. He was around animals and equipment his whole life. Then he worked for the city of Blue Ash in the department. And so I saw Bill when I was selling air cleaners before I left in 78, 79 to start what was originally Maintenance Service Inc. And then we became Groundmasters in 82. We had a more industry name. But Bill and I became friends. I just pulled up on him on his job site one day, and I asked him if I could talk to him, and then we went to breakfast probably for 12 years at 6 a.m. when the Bob Evans opened up. And I ate my breakfast, and he smoked cigarettes and drank coffee. That's when you could smoke in restaurants. And we would just talk about business. We'd talk about customers, employees, equipment, snow, and then about 40 minutes later, we'd get out of there because we needed to be to work before 7 to open up, and we did that for over a decade. So he was a good mentor for me, and he was a real equipment head, and he was also pretty good with the the elements of the plants and things like that, because that was his background. So that was very beneficial to me for the first 10 years.
It seems that he seemed like to be a fellow that really took interest in you. And here's a man that has so much wherewithal behind him, really business astutity, and yet he took the time out to work with you and help you over, like you said, a 10-year period. That's amazing. You get those.
He was about 20 years older than me, so he was a little younger than my dad. He had one daughter, and he and I were interested in the same thing. So it was a natural friendship, and it was a natural relationship. And then as time went on, I think he looked at me. I had so much energy because I was young, and we were just relentless. I would always share with him what was working for us as well.
Okay.
So it was always an exchange, but no question, he was valuable to me, especially in the beginning, because the things I didn't know were a mile long, and he could fill in a lot of blanks for me.
Wow. It seems that this mentoring, you hear this a lot. You read it in the magazines, and you're at these events, and it's mentor, mentor, mentor. I find that even though there's all these talks about this, and I could see that you were 10 years of your dad and this man for close to 10 years, and even your dad now. I just find that most people are not taking this opportunity to become better. When you look at a mentor and you talk to you say, well, I always go back to that, Tiger Woods or someone of that nature that has even LeBron James. Now, these are the best of the best. They really are.
Yeah.
And you go, do you have a coach? And they go, yes, which is a mentor. And it's like, how come? What is the reason that these guys, they're the best, physically, mentally, emotionally the best, and yet they still have mentors? It's a kind of a hard thing to sell. What do you find in this industry with that? Is here's a man, you said 10 years, that gave his time up, every morning to you.
Well, there's no question, and I watched the other interviews you did last night, which was nice. I could just sit down on my iPad and watch the first two interviews because I was out of town last night. But you brought up the coaching last night yesterday in your interview with Frank Jr., and I thought, something? Young people really need to be coached. All people do, but especially young people, because what people that are a generation ahead of you have is experience. And you can't get experience without time.
Yeah.
The way you can gain an advantage is someone experienced shortcutting what you're going to take a long time to figure out on your own. And that is so insightful that you say the coach. There's no question, a coach, a consultant, a mentor, somebody that has been where you want to go, that has the correct experience, that has good insight, that can communicate well, that is vested on your behalf, is the cheapest thing you could find to associate with.
Right.
Churches do it, with families and marriage counseling and youth programs. So there's in every walk of life, but in business, if you could get a business coach, no contest.
Right.
And that could be a competitor outside of your immediate zone or outside of your immediate market segment that could assist you and shave years off of what it's going to take to get your business to a comfortable size.
You're exactly right. Years you shave off, and yet you find there's struggles, even when I was doing it. And it was nice to hear that your dad did this. My dad was also there for me. He was running a business, and he didn't have a book. He didn't have, there's a studio. He had experience. And it was nice to look from the outside, so that helped over there. All businesses are the same. as much as people, you hear this all the time, is mine's a little different, mine's theirs. Business is run the same. So that business coach, very, very powerful, very powerful. I needed something with communications. I needed to know how to communicate and how to understand. And I was fortunate to find two in that industry. One was the E-Myth, and it was business development. And E-Myth goes across every business aspect. So those were great mentors. But communications, to go back and forth, that was where, you know, it helped immeasurably. It was amazing to be able to, especially communicate. It communicated everything. You communicate with your wife, with your daughters, with friends, family, with your employees. It's easy, for it to go well. Very easy. It's very difficult. It takes years to do that. So I find that to be a great thing. And maybe it's a humbling thing, Mike. I watch you. I'm fortunate enough to see some of your seminars, and that is an interesting thing when you talk about your way of looking at something. It's employee driven. It goes back and forth. So you find that I was listening to, you were doing it for the people, but you were mentoring people. You were mentoring the values and the culture. So pretty cool. I get this question asked all the time. Where do you find good mentors? And you gave excellent examples.
Yeah, they're all around, really. You got to be looking for one, and you've got to be a person that someone wants to help. And most of the people that I find, the vast majority, over 80% of our fellow industry associates, work extremely hard, are extremely honest, and are willing to do what someone is willing to give in time in the form of implementation or homework, effort. You know, you brought up the E-Myth, and the fellow that wrote the book came and spoke in 1998 at the February Executive Forum in California. And that was a groundbreaking 3 days for me. I mean, that changed everything for me. I was doing the things in the 90s to learn how to grow the business more effectively, and that was because in 91 we joined Alpha, which is Planet Today, for those of you younger folks, and of course was introduced to some great industry consultants back then. Frank Ross, as he still is today, is really the man that's going to teach you financial management. But I had already met Jim Palouche, you know, and the list goes on.
Yeah.
And I had found our trade association, and I had found guys that were doing, you know, 5, 10, 15, 20 million dollars, because people from the coasts were coming in, and the coasts were much ahead of the Midwest in the 90s, way bigger. So California, Florida, the East Coast, there were much bigger companies, much older companies, already going into second generations, and they were Hispanic driven. So they had integrated that into the business model years earlier, and they had grown the business incredibly compared to what most of us were doing in the Midwest. I was $1.5 million in 91. I was $5 million in 98. So still very, very humble, even though we had a very successful business and we could always pay our bills and get the things we needed for our families, and we had good jobs for our workforce and our small managements. But the E-Myth was a game changer. That really, you know, was such a short, easy read and so comprehensible at a low level that you could put yourself exactly into whatever slot you were in that he pointed out to you. And then it was like, wow, here's a little map of how to get from where you are as a high-performing individual, where a lot of business is running through you in this small business, and get other people in your business. And I met the other companies then, you know, going to the industry functions and tours, And the 90s was just a great time in Alpha for education if you were paying attention and willing to give as much as you were asking to get.
Right, right. Well, it's interesting that that you have actually met the man. He truly does have a roadmap, and not many people in this industry have this roadmap that you could do. It's very confusing, discombobulating when you don't have something like that. Again, it was fortunate to be able to do the same thing you said. I was fortunate. Here comes E-Myth, and I also had. It was funny. I had a man, Ed LaFlamme, and he's in our industry
Yep.
too. And I still remember meeting him. My brother and I, we met him, and here's this man. We're coming up in construction boots, and we had these little, back then it was a Datsun, and we drive up, and we were full of grass. And here comes a guy with a suit on, and you know, designer vitamins. I'm going, who is this man? You know, and he was the largest at that time. And he said, Dom, here's a book. You got to read it. Now, it took me a couple of years before I read it because it was, you know, in the beginning that was a hard book to get through. It didn't have the meat to it. The programs that they put together, though, hands down, incredible, incredible. And so it's good to see that there's some commonalities that we have with this. There's truly commonalities there. You know, when you look at this, Mike, it seems like, you know, I go into companies now, and the owners don't have what you have this value, this culture, and it really, again, if you look for it and you look for the successful companies, you see that there, and it amazes me because a lot of the places don't have it. Now they may be successful because, you know, how do you tell an owner, you know, you're making $200,000+ and you have a nice house, a nice car, and you're pulling in a couple $1 million that they're not successful? But I've noticed this with you, and I see this in successful companies, is this helping employees, helping the people around you. This is an interesting, in a good sense, this value is amazing. Is this something you learned? Is this something that is this just you? I mean, this is something that it always amazed me. I wanted to compliment you on that.
Thank you. You know, no question, it's a large part of my personality, I would say. I have a personality a lot like my father's in the fact that he regards other people very highly. We enjoy people, we like being around people. In building a business, you can only get so far yourself. And I know people that have gotten a lot further with a more single-minded approach than I could get. But at some point, the dependency in a service industry-driven business, people are the overwhelming factor of everything. Once you can afford everything else, okay, we can afford technology, so if there's a software program to run the business, we can afford the best equipment. We have a training program. We have an HR manager. It all gets down to the culture in which you're going to lead, manage, and hold people accountable that operate within the business. And if you can understand that and understand people want good jobs.
Sure.
People will give you way more than they get in return often for a good job. A great job, they will do what you're doing, which is give it everything you've got. So in order for us to finally get over the wall from one location and be able to understand the branching, aside from the nuts and bolts of the structure and the amounts of revenue and how you sell in another place and how you manage in a second place, it really just quite simply gets down to, do you have the people with the passion, commitment, and trust to stand that post and operate that business like you operated the first one, you know, with the same empathy and the same care for the client, the business succeeding, and taking care of people under the policies in which we manage people and not veer to something short of that.
Sure. Sure.
That's the ultimate growth vehicle. And We went from 20 people to over 500 people in our journey of 27 years. But no matter who you were, we're going to be fair, we're going to be opportunistic, but we're also going to hold you accountable to what we've asked you to do, and we're going to expect your cooperation, your commitment, and your integrity in return.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a two-way street, and if we find we're not getting that back, then we're going to ultimately separate. And so what you end up with is a very committed workforce, because if you only allow those people to stay on board, which your people begin to vet any new people. Hey, this person is confused. They're not going to uphold what we want. They're not going to do their part. Then they're going to point them out. We need to move off of this individual, whether they're in administration, in the shop, in production, in management, in customer service or sales. So that is something that if you can gain that culture, which most successful companies have, then you're just on a different level.
Yes.
Of being able to compete.
Oh, I agree. I walk into the successful companies, and I got the opportunity over the many years. You immediately see it. You see that value. You see that culture. I have to tell you, Mike. You hear a lot of times, I can't find good workers, and I can't find good workers. I sense that I always found good workers. And you're right. You put down and saying you want to help them. You want to make sure that you give them responsibility and you hold them responsible. Usually, when these things work out and you have a good culture, they give it back to you. So you respect, the things that they have to do, respect them as individuals and want them to grow in the company, and they come back and respect you. And then when it starts working, you do have to get those people that are not supposed to be there. And it's a hard thing. I became very, very good. I enjoyed hiring people. And the reason I enjoyed hiring people was I didn't, if you came in and were, say, for instance, an accounts payable person, or you were a pesticide person, I'm assuming that you know what you're going to be doing or know how to do it or could learn at the time is. But I loved to be able to talk to them about their family, about their wins, and do things in different ways, and to look and see if those values were the same as my company. And when it was, no matter what happened, even if that person couldn't handle that situation, you always could move them someplace else. And it's an interesting value. It's a really good value. And every place I go to, boom, you can feel it and you can see it with the people. And when the owner walks in the other room, they're still acting, pretty much the same way, the same culture. It's a thing of beauty. So it's so like I said, I saw it with you, and I saw some, even the men and women that we're going to be talking to later. They are there, and I find it interesting though, Mike. Is how did you figure out what to let go of and what to keep? You were at one point you were doing everything. And of course, 10 years and you grew, but you shot up. What did you let go? I mean, what did you keep? That kind of thing.
Great question. Through visiting other companies that were much further ahead of me through the 90s, and I did a lot of road trips to go visit, and I visited great companies. Rich Ackerman and Jim Waukee out in Portland had a great business for 30 plus years. They ended up selling to True Green in '98. But in '95, I went and visited. I became friends with some of their leadership. Bob Grover today, who went on to True Green, left, and then started a business. He and I are still buddies today, 25 years later. You looked at how they structured things. They had 3 branches in Portland. You looked at what they called people, how much they managed, who they reported to, what their primary roles were. I did the same thing with Rupert. Rupert was a great training ground and mentor. Chris Davitt, Craig Rupert, Ken Hockapple. Ken and I are still good friends today, their CFO. And you could ask them Why are you doing it this way? Who's talking to who in the chain of command? What's their responsibility? So when you're sitting there trying to expand, and so much of it is built around you, what are you going to do to alleviate some of your responsibility, but not relinquish any effectiveness? So my first major hire, I already had a tremendous associate who Gary and I have been together for forever. Gary did lots of jobs in the company over our 30-plus years, but he basically ran our administration and our customer service. So I had some relief there, but trying to do this branching, trying to grow, and to be able to work on the business and keep up with management training so you had a bench and then enough of a workforce, I needed a ops guy. So I made my first acquisition in '98, and I got another dear friend who had been in the industry his whole career, Chris Hayes. And Chris came, and I knew Chris was the consummate operator. This guy went to college for horticulture. He did do the apprenticeships. He worked for us for a short time. He worked for Natorp, which was a 160 or 70-year-old brand here in our city.
Okay.
They're growers, they're installers, they're real landscape people. And I asked Chris, it took 3 years to get him. I asked him 96, 97, and finally in 98. And we were at the executive conference in February. I got him to go. And that was actually when True Green and Landcare came in to say they're going to build these national powerhouses. And it was pretty ironic. So Chris wanted to be a part of a bigger thing. We were $5 million at the time. He became my VP of Ops. So now I had a guy that was managing our sales and admin, so our systems and our customer management. And now I had a guy that was going to learn how to manage our ops so that I could focus on growing the business, and whatever that meant, it meant I had relief. Yet I had a super competent, committed individual. Each individual was way better at either of those jobs than I was. So I didn't give any ground. And of course we were collaborative. We used to go to breakfast every Monday morning at 7 o'clock. And by 9:30, we had the issues solved for the next 5 days. And we did that for years. And we started doing small acquisitions. We then went north and south in '99, 35 miles south to northern Kentucky, 35 miles north to Dayton, Ohio, and began our branching and did a couple more acquisitions in 2000 in Dayton, Ohio. So we were able then to say, look, if you guys can do these big jobs, then I can work on growing the business.
Sure.
I can find some acquisitions, I can keep finding key people, and we just got the momentum going. We implemented the H-2B program in a big way, and we said, we're going to own this. We are going to be very good at this, and we were very good at it. And Chris Hayes was our leader, our VP of Ops, was our leader, because what did we need? We needed to know if we committed to this revenue that we had people that would come do it.
Wow.
And so we had to teach the guys. We taught them. We got to hang on to them.
Sure.
We've made the investment. And, that's another big thing for all of us small business people is there's two retentions you got to have, customers and employees. You retain both of them, life's pretty easy.
Sure.
We have the work we had from a year ago. We have the people that did the work from a year ago. Let's work on getting new business, and let's train some more people.
Sure.
And we got that flywheel going, and we never let off.
Mike, I never, I have a different kind of a thought process on what clients are, and I always put in that my employees are clients, the departments are clients. When that mentality of you would treat a client differently if an employee went in and they were just going crazy, whatever, they would satisfy them. If they wanted to do something, you would say, what do you need for me to help you with? What projects that is? I also did the same thing in other departments. So the sales department, one of the clients were the production department. And the production department, one of the clients was the accounting. And when you have that mentality, I know it sounds it just doesn't sound right to have everybody have a client, but to utilize, how you treat a client is that respect and wanting to make sure that they were that everything that they needed happened. And I kind of compare it to what you're doing over there when you had all these people. These people wanted to grow, but also they wanted to work with your other departments. They just didn't say, I'm in administration or I'm in HR and another person is in the ops and you were in building, but you wanted to satisfy those people and vice versa. So it's a kind of a client mentality. And we became very successful because of that mentality. And because you hear that all the time. The salespeople, they puff their chest out. We're the best. Without us, you can't do anything. And you go, well, really? It's like, okay, you need a good sales department. If you can't produce it, what's going to happen? And then you get the same thing as, oh, this is invoicing, accounting. You get there, and you don't get there if you don't satisfy accounting's needs. So that client mentality is a good mentality to have, a very good value to have.
Absolutely, that's very insightful, and there's no question departmentally, you got to have every department perform and
Right.
perform at a high level. To your comment on the salespeople, some companies are sales driven. To your example, hey, without us, you guys wouldn't have jobs. No, oh, okay. Well, without us in operations, you wouldn't have a job, because if we fail to deliver your promise that you've made to the customer, then we're all in trouble. So,
Right.
No, you've got to have it across the board, and we had leadership in every department, in each branch. And it wasn't because it was easy. It wasn't because we just said you got to have it and we had it. It's because that's what you had to work towards, and that's what you were trying to find was the individual that you thought could be the fullback, carry the ball through the hole every play, and then when things weren't going well, you knew who the resource was to go in, assess it, collaborate on it, make a plan, and then get it done. And then what's it going to cost? So our people were our absolute ability to participate and win. And I was beholden to everybody on our payroll because I didn't feel we had any people that didn't belong at our company, in our company, for any period of time.
Right.
We would separate. You would quit if you weren't committed, if you weren't going to be cooperative, because the people that were there weren't going to tolerate that, put up with that, nor were we or our policies.
Yes.
Policies help you govern, help you make the rules of how we're all going to work together. And I thought that your first speaker, Robert, was so insightful when he said, employees come to work for you and relinquish their values for the values that your company says they're going to operate from within. And while they're at work, they're cooperative with going with your values. I thought that was really cool. I like that guy. I might have to call that guy. That was good, Dominic.
Very intuitive man, and communications was his specialty. Now, my people loved when he came in because I utilized him in that same format. You bring him in and say, okay, here's what I'm working on. Here's a project I'm working on and people I'm working on. Because you have to work on people. You have to help mentor them. You may mentor them out the door. It's what it is. Sure. And you're responsible to your team because that's what your job is. And getting that, then you'd go in each one, because they all had issues, all had family issues, all had problems. But you had to get them to the level of understanding, let's solve a little bit of that. But we need, this is the project, this is our direction, and help them out. So that's a good thing to have, to be able to help with that. So I have to tell you, a funny story was, I can remember when we started getting larger, And it was that moment that one of the people there, good guy, he knew his stuff, but he didn't follow our value structure. In our company, systems ran the company, and we ran the systems. The people ran the systems. But he wouldn't do it. So you try to mentor him and mentor, and you keep on going. Finally, you just said, look, this is not working. And it was just a little bit too long. This is one of my aha moments. This is one of my thoughts of, I have to really get this done a lot earlier, because it lasts over a year. It's disruptive. And then once we parted words because I wanted to help him get to the next level. He really didn't want to be there. Maybe he did, but he didn't want to be in the sense of the company. And then afterwards, you walk through the place, and everybody looks and he goes, well, about time, Dom. And I go, really? I said, why didn't anybody tell me? You know, that's your job. That's your job. You know, and it was. As a leader, my job was to cultivate values, cultivate the culture of, like I said, everybody's a client, and give them the tools to make them the best life. That wasn't their job. So there are times when you said, like, you had the levels that you had, people held themselves accountable. You probably sat down and they were honest because you were honest, and you were going to kill them afterwards if they said something against somebody, but in the same sense. So that responsibility is very important, very, very important.
No question. No doubt about it.
We go back, you and I, to the 90s, and our growth happened back then. You know, in the beginning 90s, it wasn't too pretty, and you know, and then you start shooting. Do you find now we're going on a different decade? You know, is the industry? Do you see the industry change at all? You see this? Is it the same? Is it different? I know you mentioned there was 50 cents a gallon. Boy, that changed. What do you see? You know, could you describe our industry? What you see? You know what it was? What is it today? Do we compare that? Do we look at something like that?
Well, there's no question. The 80s and 90s, and now the early 2000s, but I'll take the 80s and 90s. I think the easiest thing to point out is things were less formal. Government wasn't really in your business. Regulation wasn't in your business. Even getting labor with the guest worker, the H-2B, things like that, the government wasn't in your business. The 2000s forward, question, regulation and government is much more in your business. Costs have gone up. Of course, there's been a couple squeezes. The dot-com was nothing compared to the 07 to 2010, to that 3-year window, from the beginning to, you know, the full trough and then back up, and then 11 forward. Things have straightened out, but it's not easier to do business today, for sure. There's just as much opportunity, I believe, as there was 35 years ago, but it's not going to be easier than it was then because things are tighter. Costs are higher against margins. Available labor is always going to be a challenge, particularly when you get the government fooling with one of the few vehicles we had, which was the guest worker program, where you could get seasonal labor to come in for the season because you're in a seasonal business. You know, healthcare is a bigger burden for everyone in the country, but particularly small business. The government is just a much bigger part of everyone's business, so they take up a lot of space when you've got a factory. If you're going to be a small operator, then those comments are probably irrelevant. You know, if you're going to be 300,000 to 400,000, because that is largely you getting out of bed in the morning and going and doing what you need to do, and you've got 5 or 6 people with you, and you're always going to turn 1 or 2 of them over. But if you're going to try to scale a business, let's just say 4 or 5 million and up, where you are committed to a workforce and you're going to have 60, 70, 80, 100 employees, you're going to be under the scope of everything going on that you see on the news. You know, with gasoline prices affecting you. Think about a worker who's got to pay $4 a gallon for gas, and he's got to get to work, and he makes $10 an hour. Now, I comprehend that. That is just like, wow. How's this guy going to do that? And then, oh, he has to have health care now? He
Sure.
has to have it, or the government's going to penalize him. Or you've got to help provide it if you provide it to anyone. So these are bigger obstacles. They can be managed, but they're not going to be ignored, and they're going to be very costly. So you've really got to think through those and be articulate about how you're going to overcome those things, because they're not going to be easy to overcome. We don't currently have a government-friendly administration, and that goes well beyond, the White House. I'm just saying in general, government has overtaken our cities, our states, and our federal government. This is going to make it a lot harder for you to scale in that regard.
Sure.
But do I think you can go build a great business today? Sure, I certainly do. And if you can get critical mass going, if you can overcome those things that are going to be a barrier to a lot of people, then it's going to become an advantage. It's going to be your advantage, because other people have got to get over that wall.
Right. That's an interesting take on how tight things are, and they were not like that in our day. We had tight, we had things to address, but this is, I agree with you when it says you can work around whatever the government does, and you want to become successful, there is a way. Is it harder? Is it less? Is it more? Back then, I'm sure that when we were back then, Mike, our parents said the same thing to us. It was easier when we did it back in the day when there was World War II than it was now, because they just go to work. But I think that that's a good thing. Is if you want to become successful, there's ways to do it.
No question.
Now, I have some. One of the things that if we're getting close to the hour here, but I find it interesting. Is there anything that you would like for our audience to take away? Any things that you'd like them to know? Some key things at all?
Well, certainly I would tell them to get involved in their state and or national associations. You've got to be out with other business people. I would say you should be participating in your industry associations, again, either statewide or go to a national like Planet. You got to know what's going on.
Sure.
You've got to meet other contractors that are in your industry, if nothing else, just to know what is going on to the left and to the right of you. I find that essential.
Well,
I also have always been a proponent of models, and you should look for a business that you believe is a model business that you want to mirror, that you want to learn about. Whether it's a Starbucks or a car dealer or another landscape company, who's running a great business, and identify why you think that business is great, and then can you validate that that business is great, that it does have tremendous customer loyalty, that it does have tremendous employee loyalty, employee development, great jobs, good bottom line, good ethics, and social give back. They're a good business to have in your community, because that's what great employers are. So what are the elements that make them that, and then what can you do on your scale? Even at a $400,000 or $500,000 company, what can you do at that level to implement pound for pound? They may be putting 1,000 pounds in, but hey, you can put 10 in, to make sure you're doing the same things. Because working in a closely held business and not succeeding is grueling.
Yeah.
Because it's tough if you win. It's really tough if you don't win. So getting involved would probably be the single fastest way to increase your own development and insight.
Well, you're on the state level and the federal level, but you also, you get involved. You look at the people there, because they're going to help you, mentor you also. When you mention that model, 9 times out of 10, they're going to help you. At one time is usually because you're right next door and you're really competing. Those people will help you. So that's a good, I like that. It's a very good way of looking at something, saying, look at the best models, see what works, and try to, you kind of take some of that stuff and put it into your business. So that was a very, very good a comment there. I'd like to ask you before, there's a couple things that I'd like to ask you. And this is the one thing you most wish someone had told you when you first started out, and how it would be for you to become successful. What do you what one thing that you most want someone to have told you back then?
Probably the single most thing, and there's lots of things I could say when you ask me to think about this. The single thing I would be certain I'm doing is I would get in a benchmarking group. I would get in a peer group. I would have a third-party moderator. I would be doing this with people from non-competing parts of the country. People like yourself, Domenic, that are out trying to help people grow their businesses. There's 5 or 6 good industry leaders right now that are running these groups. Looking at getting in one of those groups, and then who you're going to be in the group with. You don't have to stay forever. Stay for 2, 4, 5 years. If you're no longer getting a return on it, then go get in another group. But get in a group where you're going to discuss the block and tackling, the challenges that we all face, be benchmarking accountability with one another. Hey, okay, we all said you needed to do this. You agreed. You said you'd do it. You said you'd do it in this timeline. We agreed it could be done in that timeline. Have you done it? No. Yes. So the peer group, and for me, I was in 2 of them. I'm still in one of them. The first one was I was a board member of the exterior board for Planet. They don't even have that anymore.
Okay.
It's restructured for Alpha, excuse me. And there was about 8 or 10 of us. And that was informal, but we held each other accountable. We were all there to do the business of the association, but to grow our businesses.
Yes.
And there were great guys around that table. And then about 4 or 5 years into that, I was asked to get in a formal group of 5 guys. And for about 3 or 4 years, we were pretty tough on the business side, low on the social side, and then we all reached a pretty good level of success, and we socialized more while we talked business, and we still do a lot of that today.
Okay.
Particularly 3 of us still partake in it. 2 of them have retired. But I can't give you a faster way to get ahead.
It's a great tool, Mike. No, that is the way, and that's a great suggestion to everybody there. And I noticed the Go Long behind you. We spoke earlier, and talking about why this summit is in place, and we talked about also, again, do you want to do one day and come in as a consultant, or could you work 3 days or 3 months with virtually? And you even mentioned some of the excellent consultants out there, like Frank Ross, and I mentioned some also over there. With what they're trying to do is they're trying to bring some of these courses in virtually. I noticed you have it in behind you there. Could you tell us a little bit about this tool? Because I have used it, and it is an amazing internet tool. Could you tell us a little bit about this?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for today. I know we're going to run out of time here soon, and then thank you for giving me the chance just to mention that. When I was asked to get involved in Go Lawn, it was on an investor basis. It was because it was in the landscape lawn care arena. When I saw the technology initially, it was a no-brainer to me. So we can look at any piece of real estate anywhere in the U.S. or Canada on a desktop. Yes. And we can get 5 views from it, northeast, southwest, and top-down. Yes. And then we can measure anything in the image. So we could expedite the measuring process, which helps expedite the estimating process, which helps expedite the proposal generation and sales process. Yes, yes, yes. So I said, this is a no-brainer. So like most old dogs trying to be taught new tricks, initially, which was over 4 years ago, we took some jobs we had done field takeoffs on, field measurements. We measured them online. It's like, yes, this is accurate. It's more accurate. It's a computer. My daughters, particularly my youngest daughter, Allie, who works with me and who does all our marketing for Nylon, and Chris Ascalisi, who's been here for the equal amount of time. They've been here over 4 years, Chris 5 years, have worked so hard to educate contractors. And we serve the lawn care, landscape, paving, and snow. It is our marketplace. And we got guys that, were skeptical in the beginning. They've been customers for years. Their quantity of searches they do every year has gone up because they're growing their businesses, and they just realize, gosh, did I really talk to you about a $2 or $3 search and argue with you or want that to be cheaper? And it's like, are you kidding me? You can look at anything, anywhere. So looking for software in a non-software industry, which I would say contracting is very much old school, very much yellow notepad, calculator, and pen. You got to integrate it. And if you want to attract younger people, you're absolutely going to attract them by having software in your company to do all the functions. I was just at an office the other day, and they had hired a new HR manager, and this gal was implementing a software that was going to manage their entire process, from people being able to apply online, for a background check, for their health care, for their hours worked and their paychecks. So each employee, gets a number, and it's all online. And they employ hundreds of people and hundreds of seasonal people, which you can imagine what that's like. And I just thought, this gal is coming to a 20-year-old business, and within the first 6 months of being there, she's like, this is insane how we're doing this. Yeah. And she went out and vetted the software. So technology is our friend and our opportunity. You've got to embrace it. You've got to get someone in your company that's going to be the champion of that.
Some of these, Mike, are just, like you said, is no-brainer. Like your software, no-brainer. You certainly have some of the younger people in your office that could take care of it. But think about it. Like you said, $3, or you want to drive to the place. If I'm doing, I know that I used it when I would go and say, I'm going to go after 30 CVSs. Well, I want to measure them. I have somebody, I had an excellent person in my office, Mary Ann, that she would go there and do the whole thing in a few hours. Big difference. I think what we need to do, and I'm going to make it my goal, is to bring the right technology to us in our industry. So even though we are the old school and that we have, there are things that we could put into it that really will help us out in this industry. And again, that's my goal. Like I said, this is one of those things. The summit, pretty simple. You still got to play with it because it's not as simple as it is. But once you use it, even my program, 3 months would work with me virtually, 1 day worth of consultant fee. Again, Ed Flam is making that leap. Frank Ross is making that leap. So I think these are good things to do. Not everything. There are times where this thing is such an albatross that it hampers. But what we do is definitely key. And I really love your software, and I think it's a great piece to be able to help anything when you're measuring from snow and lawn. So it's good to work with your family. I like that. Now,
as yours.
Well, thank you very much, Mike. I'm sure the viewers here have an unbelievable amount of value from listening to you today, and I really appreciate you joining us for the summit. Now, if any, I didn't get quite the questions. If they have an issue, I know we're going to be on Facebook. I'm going to answer a bunch of questions. We'll go there. And Mike, I'll get some questions out there. Is there any way that, just in case someone in the audience has a question, they can get a hold of you?
Sure. The easiest way is my email, mrorie, R-O-R-I-E, at gisdynamics.com. And that's on our website as well.
Okay.
You could go on and say you want to speak to us, and we get the message.
I'll put those connections on the Facebook, and I'm going to have some emails go out to put those connections because I want them not only be able to look at your software, but also for questions. Thank you very much for that because that takes a lot of time up. So that's it from Snow Millionaire Secrets. Please leave your comments or questions in the bottom, right in the bottom there. Thank you once again for joining us. Goodbye from myself, and thank you again, Michael, for coming on here.
Thank you.
Tomorrow we joined by another guest, Ron Calisi. He is dean of one of the top internet universities, Farley Dickens University. So, ciao, ciao.